I noticed my daughter was turning pale and getting sick, so I took her to the doctor, but suddenly the doctor pulled me into another room in desperation and whispered, "Don't go back home, run, because your son-in-law." My blood froze. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." I noticed something was wrong with my daughter Sarah 3 weeks before everything fell apart. At 62, you develop an instinct about these things, especially when it comes to your only child. Sarah had always been vibrant, full of energy, the kind of woman who could juggle her demanding job as a marketing director, 2 young kids, and still have time to call me twice a week. But lately those calls had become shorter, her voice strained. When I saw her at little Emma's birthday party, my heart nearly stopped. Sarah looked like a ghost of herself. Her once bright eyes were dull and sunken, dark circles underneath them that no amount of concealer could hide. Her clothes hung loose on her frame, and I realized she must have lost at least 20 pounds since Christmas. That was only 2 months ago. "Sarah, honey, are you feeling all right?" I asked her quietly while David was busy entertaining the kids in the backyard. I watched her jump slightly at my voice, as if she hadn't heard me approach. "I'm fine, Mom. Just tired from work. You know how it is." But her smile was forced, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. When I reached out to touch her forehead, she flinched away from me. Actually flinched, like she was afraid of physical contact. David appeared at that moment, sliding his arm around Sarah's waist with what looked like affection, but felt somehow possessive to me. "She's been pushing herself too hard lately," he said with that charming smile of his. "I keep telling her to take it easy, but you know Sarah, always the perfectionist." Sarah nodded along, but I noticed how she seemed to shrink into herself when he touched her. Something cold settled in my stomach. This wasn't the confident daughter I'd raised. This wasn't even the Sarah from 6 months ago. Over the next 2 weeks, I couldn't shake the image of how frail she'd looked. I started calling more often, but David always seemed to answer the phone. "Sarah's resting," he'd say. "She's had another one of her headaches." Or, "She's not feeling up to talking today. You understand?" I didn't understand. Sarah had never been the type to avoid phone calls, especially from me. We'd been close since her father died when she was 16. She'd leaned on me through college, through her first heartbreak, through the early struggles of new motherhood. But ever since she married David 5 years ago, something had been shifting between us. The calls became less frequent, the visits more strained. David always had a reason why she couldn't make it to family dinners or why they needed to leave early. I chalked it up to the normal adjustment of a new marriage, a new family dynamic. But seeing her at Emma's party, I realized I'd been fooling myself. Something was very, very wrong. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. I'd driven over to their house in the affluent Riverside neighborhood, planning to surprise Sarah with her favorite muffins from the bakery downtown. When I knocked on the front door, David answered, and I could see past him into the living room where Sarah was sitting on the couch. She was wearing long sleeves despite the warm weather, and even from a distance I could see how pale she was. "Ross, what a surprise," David said, not stepping aside to let me in. "Sarah's not feeling well today. Maybe another time?" But Sarah had seen me, and something flickered in her eyes. For just a moment it looked like relief, or maybe desperation. "Mom?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm taking her to the doctor," I announced, pushing past David before he could stop me. "Right now." "That's really not necessary," David said quickly. "I've been monitoring her symptoms. It's just a stomach bug that's been going around." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Her skin had a grayish tint, her hair was brittle and thinning, and when she stood up from the couch, she swayed slightly as if standing was an effort. "Sarah, get your purse. We're going to see Dr. Martinez right now." For a moment, I thought David might actually try to physically stop us. His jaw tightened, and I saw something flash in his eyes that I'd never noticed before, something dark and controlling. But Sarah was already moving toward the door, and I think he realized that making a scene would only raise more questions. The drive to the medical center was mostly silent. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. When I asked her direct questions about how she was feeling, she gave me vague, non-committal answers. But I noticed how she kept checking her phone, how she seemed nervous about being away from the house for too long. Dr. Martinez had been our family physician for over 15 years. He'd delivered Emma and her little brother Jake, had seen Sarah through childhood illnesses and teenage anxiety. When he walked into the examination room and saw Sarah, his expression immediately grew concerned. The examination seemed routine at first. Blood pressure, weight check, listening to her heart and lungs, but I watched Dr. Martinez's face grow more and more serious as he continued his assessment. When he asked Sarah to roll up her sleeves, I gasped. Her arms were covered in bruises at various stages of healing. Some were yellowish-green, others were still dark purple. "Sarah, how did you get these bruises?" Dr. Martinez asked gently. "I've been clumsy lately," she said quickly, pulling her sleeves back down. "Running into things. You know how it is when you're tired and not paying attention." But Dr. Martinez wasn't buying it, and neither was I. These weren't the kind of bruises you get from bumping into furniture. They were too uniform, too deliberately placed. "I'd like to run some blood tests," he said, "just to rule out a few things. Mrs. Henderson, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" My heart started pounding as we stepped into his office. Dr. Martinez closed the door and turned to me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. It was fear mixed with urgency. "Ross," he said quietly, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't take Sarah home. Not today, not tonight. Take her somewhere safe and then call the police immediately." "What? What are you talking about?" He ran his hand through his gray hair, clearly struggling with how much to tell me. "The symptoms Sarah is exhibiting, combined with those bruises and her general condition. Ross, I believe your daughter is being systematically poisoned." The room seemed to tilt around me. Poisoned? By who? How? "Based on what I'm seeing, it's likely arsenic, small doses over time. It would cause exactly the symptoms she's been experiencing: the fatigue, weight loss, the bruising, the pale complexion. Someone would need consistent access to her food or drinks to administer it regularly." My mind immediately went to David, always so attentive, always bringing Sarah her morning coffee, always insisting on cooking dinner himself. "Her husband," I whispered. Dr. Martinez nodded grimly. "I can't make accusations without proof, but Ross." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Don't let her go back to that house. Not until we know for sure what's happening." When we walked back into the examination room, Sarah was checking her phone again, her anxiety visibly increasing. "We should get back," she said. "David will be wondering where I am." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw not the strong woman I'd raised, but a frightened, sick woman who'd been slowly dying right in front of my eyes, and I'd been too blind to see it until now. "Sarah," I said carefully, "how about you come stay with me for a few days, just until you're feeling better?" The look of panic that crossed her face told me everything I needed to know. She was terrified of what David might do if she didn't come home on time. That's when I knew Dr. Martinez was right. My daughter was in mortal danger, and the man she'd married, the father of her children, was trying to kill her. The police station felt like a foreign world as I sat across from Detective Maria Santos, my hands trembling as I tried to explain what Dr. Martinez had told me. Sarah was in the waiting room, still confused and resistant, checking her phone every few minutes like David might somehow know where we were. "Mrs. Henderson, these are serious allegations," Detective Santos said, her voice professional but kind. "We'll need to move carefully. If your son-in-law is indeed poisoning your daughter, we can't let him know we're onto him." "But Sarah's life is in danger," I said, trying to keep my voice down. "Every minute she spends in that house, he could be giving her more poison. I understand your concern, and we're going to handle this immediately. But we need Sarah to cooperate fully, and from what I can see, she's still somewhat resistant to the idea that her husband could be harming her." She was right. When I'd first told Sarah what the doctor suspected, she'd looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Mom, that's crazy. David loves me. He takes care of me. He's been so worried about my health lately." That response had chilled me more than anything else. She couldn't see it. After months or possibly years of manipulation, she couldn't see that David's care was actually killing her. Detective Santos called Sarah into the interview room, and I watched my daughter struggle to process what was being explained to her. Her face went through a range of emotions: disbelief, confusion, and then a dawning horror as certain memories seemed to surface. "He always makes my coffee," Sarah said slowly. "Every morning. He says it's because he wants to take care of me, but—" She trailed off, and I could see her mind working, connecting dots she'd never allowed herself to connect before. "What about your vitamins?" Detective Santos asked gently. "Does he give you any supplements?" Sarah's face went white. "He started giving me these special vitamins about 6 months ago. Said they would help with my energy levels, but I've only gotten more tired since I started taking them." My heart broke watching my daughter realize the truth. The man she'd trusted, the man she'd had children with, had been slowly killing her while pretending to care for her health. "There's something else," Sarah whispered, tears starting to flow. "I've been having memory problems, forgetting things, feeling confused. David keeps telling me it's stress from work, but—" She looked up at Detective Santos with frightened eyes. "Can poison cause that too?" "Arsenic poisoning can definitely affect cognitive function," the detective confirmed. "Memory loss, confusion, difficulty concentrating. These are all common symptoms." I watched my daughter's world crumble as she began to understand the full scope of what had been done to her. But along with the horror, I could see something else beginning to emerge. Anger. And anger, I thought, might be exactly what Sarah needed to survive this. "We need to get you somewhere safe tonight," Detective Santos continued. "Do you have somewhere you can stay where David won't think to look for you?" "She can stay with me," I said immediately. "No," Detective Santos shook her head. "That's the first place he'll check. We need somewhere less obvious." Sarah looked up suddenly. "My friend Lisa, from college. She lives about an hour away, and David's never really liked her. He always found excuses for why I couldn't visit her." Another red flag that none of us had recognized at the time. David had been systematically isolating Sarah from her support system, and we'd all just accepted his explanations. "Good, but first, we need to go back to your house and get some things. The children, some clothes, important documents, and we need to do it in a way that doesn't raise David's suspicions." The drive back to Sarah's house felt like we were walking into enemy territory. Detective Santos had given us specific instructions. Act normal, don't let David suspect anything, gather what we needed quietly. When we pulled into the driveway, David was waiting on the front porch. Even from the car, I could see the tension in his posture, the way his eyes immediately went to Sarah as she got out of the passenger seat. "There you are," he said, and his tone was light, but there was something underneath it that made my skin crawl. I was starting to worry. "How did the doctor's visit go?" "Just a stomach bug, like you thought," Sarah replied, and I was proud of how steady her voice sounded. "Mom wanted to make sure I was okay." David's eyes flicked to me, and for just a moment I saw something cold and calculating there. "And what did the doctor say, Ross? I hope you're satisfied that Sarah's in good hands." "Of course," I managed to say. "I just worry. You know how mothers are." "Indeed I do." There was something in the way he said it that felt like a warning. We went inside, and I watched David hover around Sarah as she moved through the house. He followed her upstairs when she went to check on the kids, stood in the bathroom doorway while she gathered some toiletries. It was suffocating, the way he monitored her every movement. "I thought I'd stay the night at Mom's," Sarah said casually as she packed a small overnight bag. "Just so she doesn't worry about me being sick." David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I don't think that's necessary, sweetheart. I can take care of you here. Besides, the kids need their mother." "It's just one night," Sarah said, and I heard a slight tremor in her voice. "Mom's been so worried, and I know she won't sleep if I don't stay with her." I watched this exchange with growing horror. This was clearly a pattern, David finding reasons why Sarah couldn't spend time away from the house, couldn't maintain relationships outside of their marriage. And Sarah had learned to navigate around his objections carefully, like she was walking on eggshells. "Actually," David said suddenly, "I think I should come with you. In case you need anything during the night." My blood ran cold. If David came with us, our plan would fall apart completely. Sarah would be trapped again, and who knew when we'd get another chance to get her to safety. "That's not necessary," I said quickly. "I can take care of my own daughter for one night." David's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sure you can, Ross. But Sarah's my wife, my responsibility." The way he said "my" sent chills down my spine. This wasn't love or concern. This was ownership. Sarah looked between us, and I could see her beginning to panic. But then Emma came running downstairs, having heard our voices. "Mommy, are you feeling better?" "Much better, sweetheart," Sarah said, scooping up her 6-year-old daughter. In that moment, holding her child, I saw something shift in Sarah's expression, determination, maternal instinct overriding everything else. "David, honey," she said, turning to her husband with a smile that looked almost normal. "Would you mind if I took the kids with me to Mom's? Emma's been asking to have a sleepover with Grandma, and it might be good for them to get out of the house for a night." It was brilliant. David couldn't object to the children visiting their grandmother without seeming unreasonable, and Sarah knew it. I watched David struggle with this request, his need to control warring with his need to maintain his facade of being a caring husband and father. Finally, he nodded. "Of course, if that's what you think is best." But his eyes promised consequences later. 20 minutes later, we were loading the kids into my car. David stood in the doorway watching us, and I felt his gaze like a weight on my back. Just before we pulled out of the driveway, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from him. "What does it say?" I asked quietly. Sarah's hands were shaking as she read it. "He says he loves me and hopes I feel better soon, and that he'll see us tomorrow." The message seemed innocent enough, but there was something about the timing of it that felt threatening, as if he was reminding Sarah that this was temporary, that she would have to come back to him eventually. As we drove away from that house, I made a silent promise to myself. My daughter would never have to go back there. Whatever it took, however long it took, I would make sure David could never hurt her again. But first, we had to prove what he'd been doing to her, and that meant Sarah was going to have to be stronger than she'd ever been in her life. The blood test results came back 3 days later, and they confirmed our worst fears. "Doctor," Martinez called me personally to deliver the news, his voice heavy with the weight of what he had to tell me. "Ross, Sarah's arsenic levels are dangerously high. This wasn't accidental exposure. Someone has been giving her consistent doses over what I estimate to be at least 6 months, possibly longer." I was sitting in Lisa's kitchen when I took the call, watching Sarah help Emma with a coloring book while little Jake played with blocks on the floor. For those 3 days staying at Lisa's house, Sarah had already started to look better. Some color had returned to her cheeks, and she was eating more than she had in months. Seeing the improvement only made the doctor's confirmation more devastating. How much longer? I couldn't finish the question. If it had continued at this rate, maybe 2 more months before organ failure. Ross, whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. The doses were calculated to cause maximum suffering while avoiding immediate detection. After hanging up, I found Detective Santos's card and called her immediately. She agreed to meet us at the police station that afternoon, and this time, she brought a colleague, Detective James Wright, who specialized in domestic abuse cases. "Mrs. Henderson," Detective Wright said as we settled into the interview room. "Now that we have concrete evidence of poisoning, we can move forward with a full investigation. But I need to ask Sarah some difficult questions about her marriage and her husband's behavior." Sarah nodded, but I could see her hands trembling. "Even after 3 days away from David, she still jumped every time a phone rang, still checked over her shoulder like she expected him to appear at any moment." "Sarah, I want you to think back over the past year or so," Detective Wright began gently. "Were there any changes in David's behavior? Any new routines or habits that started around the time you began feeling sick?" Sarah was quiet for a long time, her brow furrowed in concentration. "He started being more attentive, I guess, making my coffee every morning, bringing me lunch at work sometimes. He said he wanted to take better care of me." "What about your social life? Did that change?" "He started having opinions about my friends," Sarah said slowly. "He said Lisa was a bad influence, that she was trying to cause problems in our marriage. He didn't like it when I went out with coworkers after work. He said married women shouldn't need friends outside their family." I felt sick listening to this. How had I missed these warning signs? How had I let my daughter become so isolated? "Did he ever discourage you from seeing your mother?" Detective Wright asked, glancing at me. Sarah's face crumpled slightly. "He said Mom was too controlling, that she was interfering in our marriage." "He convinced me that you disapproved of him, Mom, that you were trying to turn me against him. I started avoiding family dinners because he would be in such a bad mood afterward." The manipulation had been so complete, so insidious. David had systematically cut Sarah off from everyone who might have noticed what was happening to her, or who might have supported her if she'd tried to leave. "Sarah," Detective Santos leaned forward. "We need to ask you about David's first marriage. Do you know much about his first wife?" Sarah looked confused. "First wife? David wasn't married before me. He told me I was his first wife, his first real love." The two detectives exchanged glances. Sarah, we've done some preliminary research on your husband. He was married before, to a woman named Jennifer Morrison. She died 4 years before he met you. The color drained from Sarah's face. That's impossible. David would have told me. We don't keep secrets from each other. How did she die? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Officially, it was listed as death by natural causes. She'd been sick for months with what doctors thought was a chronic illness. Fatigue, weight loss, cognitive problems. Sound familiar? Sarah stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back. No, this isn't happening. David wouldn't. He couldn't, but I could see in her eyes that she was beginning to understand. The man she'd married, the father of her children, was a calculating killer who had done this before. There's more. Detective Wright continued gently. Jennifer Morrison had a life insurance policy worth $500,000. David was the beneficiary. We need to check Sarah's insurance policies, I said immediately. Sarah sank back into her chair, her face pale. He increased my life insurance last year. Said it was because we had the kids to think about. It's worth $750,000 now. The room fell silent except for the sound of Sarah's ragged breathing. Everything was falling into place, a horrifying picture of premeditated murder disguised as loving care. There's something else you should know, Detective Santos said quietly. We've been monitoring David since you left. He's made several attempts to find out where you're staying. He's called your workplace, contacted old friends, even hired a private investigator. He hired a private investigator? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Sarah, this man is not going to give up easily. He's invested too much time and planning into this. We need to move quickly to build our case, because once he realizes we're on to him, he might become desperate. That night back at Lisa's house, Sarah couldn't sleep. I found her at 2 a.m. sitting on the back porch, staring out into the darkness. I keep thinking about Jennifer, she said when I sat down beside her. What her last days must have been like. Did she know? Did she figure it out before it was too late? Sarah, you can't torture yourself with those thoughts. But I should have known, Mom. There were signs. The way he isolated me from you and my friends. The way he controlled everything I ate and drank. The way he convinced me that my memory problems were just stress. She turned to look at me, tears streaming down her face. I let him poison me for months. I trusted him completely while he was slowly killing me. This isn't your fault, I said firmly. David is a master manipulator. He chose you because you were trusting and loving. Those aren't character flaws, Sarah. Those are the best parts of who you are. But Emma and Jake, what if he tries to hurt them too? What if he's already? The doctors checked the kids, remember? They're fine. He never targeted them because they weren't worth anything to him financially. You were the prize, Sarah. You had the career, the insurance policies, the assets he wanted access to. Sarah was quiet for a long time processing this information. When she finally spoke again, her voice was different, stronger. I want to help catch him, she said. I want to make sure he never does this to anyone else. Sarah, that could be dangerous. If David suspects you're working with the police, Mom, he tried to murder me. He killed another woman before me. How many more women are out there who might fall for his charm? How many more Jennifers could there be if we don't stop him? I looked at my daughter in the dim light from the porch lamp, and I saw something I hadn't seen in months. Determination. The Sarah I'd raised, the fighter, was finally starting to come back. What did the detectives have in mind? I asked. They want me to go back to him, wear a wire, try to get him to admit what he's been doing. They think if he believes he's won, if he thinks I'm completely under his control again, he might get careless. The thought of Sarah going back to that house, back to that monster, made my stomach turn. Absolutely not. It's too risky. It might be the only way to get enough evidence to convict him. And Mom, she took my hand. I need to do this. I need to take back some control over what happened to me. Over the next 2 days, Detective Wright laid out their plan. Sarah would return home claiming that her time away had helped her realize how much she missed David and needed him. She would wear a recording device and try to get David to talk about the vitamins he'd been giving her, about his concern for her health, anything that might be incriminating. The key is to make him feel like he's won, Detective Wright explained. Men like David are narcissists. They can't help but gloat about their cleverness once they think they're in control again. What if he gets suspicious? I asked. What if he realizes Sarah is different? That's a risk, Detective Santos admitted. But Sarah will only be in the house for a few hours, and we'll have surveillance teams positioned around the property. At the first sign of trouble, we move in. Sarah was resolute about going through with it, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She was terrified of seeing David again, terrified of having to pretend to love the man who had tried to kill her. The night before the operation, Sarah asked me to stay with her while she put Emma and Jake to bed. She read them their favorite story, held them a little longer than usual, kissed them a few extra times. "Mommy has to go somewhere tomorrow," she told them gently, "but Grandma Ross will be here with you, and I promise I'll be back soon." "Are you going to see Daddy?" Emma asked, and I saw Sarah's face tighten. "Yes, sweetheart. Mommy has to talk to Daddy about some important things." After the kids were asleep, Sarah and I sat together on the couch. She was wearing the wire transmitter that Detective Wright had given her, testing it to make sure it was working properly. "I'm scared, Mom," she admitted quietly. "I know, honey. But you're not alone. The police will be watching, and you're stronger than David ever realized. He underestimated you, and that's going to be his downfall." Sarah nodded, but I could see her hands shaking. Tomorrow she would have to face the man who had spent months slowly murdering her, and pretend that she still loved him. I prayed that our plan would work, and that by tomorrow night, David would be in custody, where he could never hurt another woman again. I drove Sarah to within 2 blocks of her house that morning, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. She sat in the passenger seat, checking and rechecking the small recording device hidden beneath her blouse. The police had assured us it was undetectable, but we both knew that if David found it, Sarah's life would be in immediate danger. "Remember," I said for the 10th time, "you're only staying for a few hours. Just long enough to get him talking about the vitamins, about your health, about anything that might be incriminating. Don't push too hard or he'll get suspicious." Sarah nodded, but I could see the terror in her eyes. "What if I can't do it, Mom? What if I see him and I just freeze up?" "You can do this," I said firmly. "You're the strongest person I know. You survived months of poison, and you're still here. That takes incredible strength." She took a deep breath and opened the car door. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart, more than you'll ever know." I watched her walk down the street toward the house that had become her prison, her shoulders straight with determination despite the fear I knew she was feeling. The surveillance van was parked 3 houses down, disguised as a utility vehicle. Detective Wright had given me a radio so I could monitor their communications, though he'd warned me that I might not want to hear everything that was about to unfold. 20 minutes later, I heard Detective Santos's voice crackle through the radio. "Subject has entered the house. Audio feed is clear." Then I heard David's voice, and it made my skin crawl. "Sarah, sweetheart, you're back. I missed you so much. How are you feeling?" "Much better," Sarah replied, and I was amazed at how normal she sounded. "Mom took good care of me, but I realized I missed you and the kids too much to stay away any longer." "I'm so glad to hear that. I was worried you might have gotten some ideas about us, about our marriage. You know how your mother can be." Even through the radio, I could hear the manipulation in his voice. The subtle way he was trying to plant doubt about me, trying to isolate Sarah again. "Mom was just being protective," Sarah said carefully. "But I told her that you've been taking such good care of me. The vitamins you give me, all the attention to my health. I know how lucky I am to have a husband who cares so much." There was a pause, and I held my breath. This was it. The moment when David would either take the bait or become suspicious. "Of course I take care of you," he said finally. "You're my wife, my responsibility. Speaking of which, you look like you could use some of your vitamins. You still look a bit pale." "You're right," Sarah said. "I haven't taken them in a few days, and I can definitely tell the difference. Could you get them for me? You know how these health things confuse me." I heard footsteps and then David's voice again. "Here you go, sweetheart. Take 2 of these with some water. They'll help with your energy levels." My heart was pounding as I listened to Sarah swallow what I knew were poison pills. The detectives had assured me that a few doses wouldn't be enough to cause immediate harm, especially since her body had been slowly eliminating the arsenic over the past week. But hearing my daughter willingly ingest poison, even as part of a plan to catch her would-be killer, was almost unbearable. "Thank you, honey," Sarah said. "You always know exactly what I need. I don't know what I'd do without you taking care of me like this." "You'll never have to find out," David replied, and there was something in his tone that sent chills down my spine. "I'll always be here to take care of you, Sarah, no matter what." Over the next hour, Sarah masterfully guided the conversation, getting David to talk about how he'd researched the best vitamins for her condition, how he'd ordered them from a special supplier, how carefully he monitored her dosage to make sure she got exactly what she needed. With each revelation, the case against him grew stronger. But then something went wrong. "Sarah," David said suddenly, his voice changing, becoming sharper. "Your phone has been turned off for the past week. That's unusual for you. I told you I wasn't feeling well. I didn't want to be bothered with calls and texts while I was recovering. But you always keep your phone on. Always. Even when you're sleeping. It's one of your quirks that used to annoy me." There was a long pause. "Turn around." "What?" "Turn around. Now." Through the radio, I could hear the fear creeping into Sarah's voice. "David, what's wrong? Why are you acting like this?" "Because something isn't right. You're different. The way you're talking. The questions you're asking about the vitamins. It's like you're performing. Like you're reading from a script." Detective Wright's voice crackled through the radio to his team. "Situation is deteriorating. All units prepare to move in." But David's voice came through loud and clear. "Don't move, Sarah. Don't even breathe. Because I know exactly what you're doing, and if there are cops listening to this, they better know that I have nothing left to lose." My blood turned to ice. Sarah was trapped in that house with a man who now knew she was working with the police, and he'd just admitted he had nothing left to lose. "David, please." Sarah's voice was shaking now. "I don't know what you're talking about. I just came home because I missed you." "Stop lying." David's voice exploded through the radio. "I saw the surveillance van parked down the street. I saw the way you've been steering our conversation. You know, don't you? You know about the vitamins, about Jennifer, about everything." "I don't know what you mean about Jennifer. My first wife, Sarah, the one I never told you about because I knew you'd ask too many questions, just like you're doing now." The radio crackled with activity as Detective Wright coordinated with his team. "We're moving in. All units converge on the house now." But David wasn't finished. "You want to know the truth about Jennifer? She figured it out too, near the end. Started refusing to take her medications, so I had to get creative. Do you know how easy it is to put arsenic in someone's shampoo? She absorbed it right through her scalp while washing her hair." I felt sick listening to him describe Jennifer's murder with such casual cruelty. But what terrified me more was what this revelation meant for Sarah. "You're a monster," Sarah whispered. "I'm practical," David replied. "Jennifer's life insurance paid for this house, funded my lifestyle for years. Your insurance will set me up for life. The kids will be fine. They'll get over losing their mother eventually. Children are resilient. You won't get away with this, won't I? A grieving widower whose wife died suddenly after a brief illness? It worked perfectly the first time. The only problem was finding another victim as perfect as Jennifer. But then I met you, successful, trusting, with excellent health insurance and a mother who clearly has money to inherit eventually too." The callousness of his planning was breathtaking. He'd chosen Sarah not out of love, but as a business transaction. A profitable murder disguised as marriage. "The police know everything," Sarah said, her voice stronger now. "They have evidence. My blood tests, my medical records. You can't cover this up like you did with Jennifer. Maybe not. But I can make sure you don't live to testify against me." That's when I heard the sound that will haunt me for the rest of my life. Sarah screaming. Detective Wright's voice exploded through the radio. "Breach! Breach! All units move in now!" The next few minutes were chaos. Shouting, breaking glass, more screaming from Sarah. I sat in my car, helpless, listening to my daughter fight for her life while armed police officers stormed the house where she was trapped with a killer. Then suddenly, silence. "Suspect is down," Detective Wright's voice came through the radio. "Victim is secure. We need paramedics immediately." "Sarah?" I screamed into the radio. "Is Sarah okay?" But no one answered me. I could see the ambulance racing down the street toward the house, and I knew that my daughter's ordeal was far from over. 20 minutes later, Detective Santos appeared at my car window. Her face was grim, her uniform torn and dirty. "Ross, Sarah is alive. She's conscious and talking. But David," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "David tried to give her a massive overdose of arsenic when he realized we were closing in. She fought him, managed to spit most of it out, but she still ingested some. The paramedics are working on her now." I was already getting out of the car, running toward the house where I could see the ambulance parked in the driveway. "Will she be okay?" "The doctors think so, but they need to get her to the hospital immediately to flush the poison from her system." As I reached the ambulance, I saw Sarah on a stretcher, an oxygen mask over her face, but her eyes open and alert. She reached out her hand to me and I grabbed it, holding tight. "We got him, Mom," she whispered through the mask. "He confessed to everything. He can't hurt anyone else now." I squeezed her hand as the paramedics loaded her into the ambulance. "You're safe now, sweetheart. It's over." But as we raced toward the hospital, I knew that while the immediate danger was over, the real work of healing, physically and emotionally, was just beginning. The hospital room felt like a sanctuary after everything we'd been through. Sarah was connected to an IV that was slowly flushing the arsenic from her system, but the doctors said she was responding well to treatment. The immediate danger was over, but the legal battle was just beginning. Detective Wright visited us the next morning, carrying a thick folder of documents and wearing an expression that was equal parts satisfaction and exhaustion. He pulled up a chair beside Sarah's bed and opened the folder. "Sarah, I want you to know that the recording you made yesterday is going to put David away for life. His confession to Jennifer Morrison's murder, combined with the physical evidence we found in your house, gives us everything we need." "What kind of physical evidence?" I asked. "Hidden in his home office, we found detailed records of both murders. Dosage charts, purchase receipts for arsenic compounds, even photographs documenting the progression of both women's decline. He kept it all like some kind of trophy collection." Sarah's face went pale. "He was documenting my death? Like it was a project?" "I'm afraid so. But Sarah, that documentation is also going to be the key to convicting him. He was meticulous about recording everything. The amounts he gave you, the timeline, even notes about which symptoms you were displaying at different stages." Detective Wright pulled out a photograph and hesitated before showing it to us. "This might be difficult to see, but I think you need to know the full extent of what he was doing." The photograph showed a wall in David's office covered with pictures of Sarah taken over the past 6 months. In the earliest photos, she looked healthy and vibrant. But as the timeline progressed, I could see the systematic deterioration, the weight loss, the pale skin, the hollow eyes. It was like watching someone waste away in time-lapse photography. "There are similar photo progressions for Jennifer Morrison," Detective Wright continued. "He treated both murders like scientific experiments. The narcissism and complete lack of empathy required to document your suffering like this. It's evidence of extreme psychopathy." Sarah stared at the photographs of herself, her hand unconsciously going to her throat. "I remember him taking some of these pictures. He said he wanted to document my recovery from what he called my mysterious illness. He convinced me I was getting better when I was actually dying." The good news is that his obsessive record-keeping means we have an ironclad case. David's lawyer has already approached us about a plea deal, but the prosecutor isn't interested. They want him to face the full consequences of what he's done. Over the next few days, as Sarah recovered her strength, more details emerged about the scope of David's crimes. The police had frozen all of his assets and discovered that he'd already started the process of claiming Sarah's life insurance. He'd even drafted a will that would have given him full custody of Emma and Jake, along with access to any inheritance they might receive from me in the future. "He had it all planned out," Sarah said to me one afternoon as we sat in the hospital garden. "Every detail, every contingency. If I had died, he would have been the grieving widower with 2 young children. Everyone would have felt sorry for him." "But you didn't die," I reminded her. "You fought back, and now he's going to pay for what he did to you and Jennifer." Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching Emma and Jake play on the small playground near the garden. Lisa had been bringing them to visit every day, and it was clear that they sensed something important had happened, even if they didn't understand the full scope of it. "I keep thinking about the night I almost didn't come to Emma's birthday party," Sarah said. "Do you remember? David said I was too sick to travel, that it would be better if I stayed home and rested. If I had listened to him, if I hadn't come. But you did come, and I saw what was happening to you, and we got you help in time." "It's strange," Sarah continued. "For months I thought I was losing my mind. The memory problems, the confusion, the exhaustion. David convinced me that I was falling apart, that I couldn't trust my own perceptions, but it was the poison all along. I watched my daughter process everything she'd been through, and I was amazed by her resilience. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a shadow of herself, literally dying from poison administered by the man she trusted most. Now she was clear-eyed and determined, ready to face whatever came next." "Sarah," I said carefully, "have you thought about what you want to do after the trial?" About where you and the kids want to live? She looked at me with a small smile. Actually, I have. I've been thinking that maybe it's time for a fresh start, somewhere far from all of this, where Emma and Jake can grow up without the shadow of what their father did. That sounds wise. I was wondering. She hesitated, then continued. I was wondering if you might want to come with us. Help me raise the kids. Be the kind of grandmother you never got the chance to be when David was controlling our lives. The offer took my breath away. For years, I'd watched from the sidelines as David systematically separated Sarah from her family. Now she was asking me to be a central part of her children's lives, to help her build something new from the ashes of everything David had destroyed. I would love that more than anything, I said, tears starting to flow. Good, Sarah said, squeezing my hand, because I'm going to need all the help I can get. Learning to trust my own judgment again, learning to be a single mother, learning to live without fear. It's going to be a long process. A week later, we had our answer about David's fate. Detective Wright called to tell us that David had been formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, attempted murder, domestic abuse, and fraud. The prosecutor was seeking life without parole. His lawyer tried one last time to negotiate a plea deal, Detective Wright told us. But when we showed the prosecutor those photographs, those detailed records of how he tortured both you and Jennifer Morrison, there was no question. David Rivers is going to spend the rest of his life in prison. Sarah nodded, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. The legal proceedings had taken a toll, even though she knew they were necessary. There's one more thing, Detective Wright continued. Jennifer Morrison's family wants to meet with you, Sarah. They want to thank you for bringing their daughter's killer to justice. 2 days later, we sat in a quiet coffee shop across from Jennifer's parents, Robert and Margaret Morrison. They were an older couple, probably in their 70s, and I could see the years of grief etched in their faces. We never believed that Jennifer died of natural causes, Margaret said, her voice soft but determined. She was too healthy, too young. But the doctors couldn't find anything wrong, and David was so convincing in his role as the grieving husband. He fooled everyone, Robert added, even us initially. He seemed so devastated by her death, so lost without her. It never occurred to us that he was the one who killed her. Sarah reached across the table and took Margaret's hand. I'm so sorry for your loss. Jennifer deserved so much better than what David did to her. But because of your courage, Margaret said, he's finally going to pay for what he did, and no other woman will ever have to go through what you and Jennifer went through. As we prepared to leave the coffee shop, Robert handed Sarah a small wrapped package. This was Jennifer's, he said, her grandmother's locket. We'd like you to have it, as a reminder that you survived something that took our daughter away from us. Sarah unwrapped the package to reveal a delicate silver locket engraved with flowers. Inside were 2 small photos, one of Jennifer as a young woman, smiling and full of life, and one of her with her parents. She would have wanted another survivor to have it, Margaret said, someone who understood what she went through. That night, Sarah clasped the locket around her neck as she tucked Emma and Jake into bed. They were staying in an extended stay hotel while we looked for a house in a new city, far from the memories and trauma of their old life. Mommy, Emma asked as Sarah kissed her goodnight, when are we going to see Daddy again? Sarah and I had discussed how to handle the children's questions about David. We'd decided on an age-appropriate version of the truth, that Daddy had made some very bad choices and had to go away for a long time as a consequence. Daddy made some choices that hurt people, Sarah said gently. Because of those choices, he has to stay in a place where he can't hurt anyone else. But you and Jake are safe now, and Mommy and Grandma Ross are going to take very good care of you. Emma seemed to accept this explanation, but I could see the questions in her eyes. Someday, when she was older, she would want to know more about what her father had done. But for now, it was enough that she felt safe and loved. After the children were asleep, Sarah and I sat together planning our new life. We'd decided on a small city in Colorado, far from the humid reminders of everything that had happened. Sarah had already been in touch with a marketing firm there, and they were interested in hiring her for a remote position that would give her flexibility to be present for her children's healing. Are you scared? I asked her as we looked through rental listings online. Terrified, she admitted, but also excited. For the first time in years, I get to make choices based on what I want, what's best for my children, what feels right to me. David can't influence those decisions anymore. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and marveled at the transformation. The hollow-eyed, sickly woman I'd taken to the doctor just a month ago was gone. In her place was someone stronger, more determined, more authentically herself than I'd seen her in years. The poison had nearly killed her, but surviving it had also freed her in ways that went far beyond the physical. She was reclaiming her life, her identity, her power, and this time I was going to be there to support her every step of the way. 6 months after David's conviction, I stood in the kitchen of our new home in Boulder, Colorado, watching Sarah teach Emma how to make pancakes from scratch. The morning sunlight streamed through windows that Sarah had chosen herself, illuminating a space that belonged entirely to us. No shadows, no memories of poison or manipulation. "Grandma Ross, look!" Jake called from the living room, where he was building an elaborate tower with blocks. "It's taller than me." Sarah smiled as she helped Emma flip a pancake. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Just be careful it doesn't fall down." "Like Daddy's house did?" Emma asked innocently. Sarah and I exchanged glances. The children had adapted to our new life with surprising resilience, but they occasionally asked questions that reminded us they were still processing everything that had happened. "Daddy's house didn't fall down, sweetheart," Sarah said gently, "but we decided we wanted to live somewhere new, somewhere that was just ours." Emma nodded seriously and returned her attention to the pancakes. At 7 now, she was old enough to understand that their father wasn't coming back, but young enough that she wasn't asking for detailed explanations. The child psychologist we'd been seeing said this was normal. Children often accept major changes more easily than adults do. The past 6 months had been a journey of healing in ways I never could have imagined. Sarah had thrown herself into rebuilding her life with the same determination she'd once applied to her career. She'd found a part-time marketing position with a local environmental nonprofit, work that felt meaningful to her in a way her corporate job never had. "I spent so many years doing what I thought I was supposed to do," she'd told me one evening as we sat on our back porch, watching Emma and Jake play in the yard. The prestigious job, the perfect house, the successful husband. But none of it was real. This life, this simple life we're building, this feels authentic in a way nothing has for years. The transformation in Sarah had been remarkable to witness. The confident, independent woman I'd raised was emerging again, stronger for having survived something unimaginable. She'd gained back the weight she'd lost, but more importantly, she'd regained her sense of self. "You know what I realized yesterday?" Sarah said as she plated the pancakes Emma had helped make. "I haven't checked over my shoulder when I'm walking alone in 6 weeks. I used to do it constantly, even here, even knowing David was in prison. But I think I'm finally starting to believe that I'm really safe." The trial had been difficult, but cathartic. Sarah had testified about the months of systematic poisoning, about the manipulation and isolation, about the moment she realized the man she'd married had been trying to kill her. David had sat stone-faced through her testimony, showing no emotion even when she described the terror of discovering his previous wife had died under identical circumstances. He'd been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge had called his crimes among the most calculated and callous acts of domestic terrorism she'd ever encountered. David's lawyer had tried to argue for a sentence that would allow for eventual parole, claiming David was a victim of mental illness who deserved compassion. But the prosecutor had shown the jury those photographs, those meticulous records of 2 women's systematic murder, and the jury had deliberated for less than 3 hours. "Good," Sarah had said when Detective Wright called to tell us about the sentencing. "Jennifer Morrison's parents can finally have some peace, and I never have to worry about him hurting anyone else." But the legal victory, important as it was, had been only one part of Sarah's healing process. The real work had been learning to trust again, trust her own perceptions, trust her ability to make decisions, trust that the people who claimed to love her actually did. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," she'd confided to me during one of our evening talks. David conditioned me to believe that good things always came with hidden costs, that people who seemed to care about me were really just manipulating me for their own benefit. I know intellectually that's not true, but emotionally, I'm still learning to accept genuine kindness. The children's healing had been different but equally important to witness. Emma had gone through a phase of being clingy and anxious, afraid to let Sarah out of her sight. Jake, who was only 4, seemed less affected on the surface but had developed some behavioral issues that required patience and consistency to address. "Children are incredibly resilient," their therapist had told us. but they also internalize more than we realize. The important thing is that they now have stability, honesty, and genuine safety. That foundation will serve them well as they grow up. This morning felt different somehow, more settled than the others. Sarah moved around our kitchen with an ease that spoke of genuine comfort, and the children's laughter had the carefree quality that had been missing during those dark months when David was slowly poisoning their mother. "Mom," Sarah said as we cleaned up after breakfast, "I got a call yesterday from Margaret Morrison." I looked up from loading the dishwasher. Sarah had stayed in touch with Jennifer's parents, finding comfort in their shared experience and their mutual determination to honor Jennifer's memory. She wanted to let me know that they're starting a foundation in Jennifer's name. It's going to provide resources for women who are trying to leave abusive relationships, legal support, safe housing, counseling. They asked if I wanted to be involved. "What did you tell her?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, her hands stilling as she wiped down the counter. "I told her I needed to think about it. Part of me wants to help other women avoid what Jennifer and I went through, but another part of me just wants to focus on building a peaceful life for Emma and Jake." "Both impulses make perfect sense," I said. "There's no timeline for when or how you choose to turn your experience into something that might help others." That's what I keep telling myself. For now, I think the most important thing is proving to my children that we can build something beautiful from the ashes of what David destroyed. Maybe later, when they're older and more secure, I'll be ready to take on something bigger. That afternoon, Sarah took the children to their swimming lessons while I stayed home to work in the garden we'd planted together. As I weeded around the tomato plants, I reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. A year ago, I'd been a worried mother watching her daughter fade away, powerless to help and not even fully understanding what was happening. Now, I was an integral part of my grandchildren's daily lives, watching them thrive in an environment free from fear and manipulation. The sound of car doors slamming announced their return from the pool. Emma and Jake burst through the back door, their hair still damp and their faces glowing with excitement. "Grandma Ross, I swam all the way across the pool," Emma announced proudly. "And I put my face in the water," Jake added, not to be outdone by his sister. Sarah appeared behind them, carrying their swim bags and wearing the kind of relaxed, genuine smile I hadn't seen on her face in years. "They were both incredible today," she said, settling into one of the patio chairs we'd set up under the apple tree. "Emma's going to be ready for the intermediate class soon, and Jake is finally comfortable in the water." As the children ran off to play in the yard, Sarah and I sat together in comfortable silence. The late afternoon sun filtered through the leaves above us, and I could hear the sounds of our neighbors going about their peaceful suburban lives. It was ordinary in the best possible way. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked suddenly. "Giving up your life in California to come here with us?" I looked at her in surprise. "Regret it? Sarah, this has been the most meaningful year of my life. Getting to really know Emma and Jake, watching them heal and grow, seeing you become the strong, independent woman I always knew you were. How could I regret any of that? I just sometimes feel guilty about how much you've sacrificed. Your friends, your routine, your independence." "Sweetheart," I said, reaching over to take her hand. "I didn't sacrifice my independence. I chose to use it in a different way. And as for friends and routines, those were just the comfortable patterns of a life that didn't have enough purpose. This life has purpose." That evening, after the children were in bed, Sarah and I sat together looking through photo albums from our first 6 months in Colorado. The pictures told the story of our gradual healing, Sarah's face growing brighter and more relaxed as the weeks passed, Emma and Jake becoming more animated and carefree, all of us learning to trust in the permanence of our safety and happiness. "Look at this one," Sarah said, pointing to a picture from our hike in Rocky Mountain National Park. In it, Emma and Jake were perched on a boulder, their arms raised triumphantly toward the sky, while Sarah and I stood behind them, our faces glowing with pride and joy. "I remember that day," I said. "Emma was so proud that she'd climbed that rock all by herself. And Jake spent the whole drive home talking about how he was going to be a mountain climber when he grew up." Sarah smiled at the memory. That was the first time since we moved here that I felt completely present in the moment. Not looking over my shoulder, not waiting for something bad to happen, just fully enjoying time with my children. She closed the photo album and leaned back in her chair. "I think I'm ready to call Margaret Morrison back," she said quietly. "About the foundation?" Sarah nodded. "I want to help, but on my own terms. Maybe not as a public spokesperson or anything like that, but behind the scenes, helping to develop resources, providing input on what women in abusive situations actually need. That sounds like a perfect way to honor Jennifer's memory while still protecting your own peace. I keep thinking about something Detective Wright told me during the trial, Sarah continued. He said that domestic abusers like David often get away with their crimes because their victims are too afraid or too broken to speak up. But he also said that when one woman finds the courage to tell her story, it makes it easier for other women to find their voices too. Is that what you want to do? Tell your story? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering. Not publicly, not yet. But maybe someday. When Emma and Jake are old enough to understand. When I've had enough distance from it all to speak about it without being re-traumatized. Maybe then I'll be ready to help other women recognize the warning signs that I missed. As we prepared for bed that night, I found Sarah standing in the doorway of the children's room watching them sleep. What are you thinking about? I whispered. How different their lives are going to be from what I originally planned, she said softly. I thought I was giving them the perfect family, the successful father, the beautiful home, the financial security. But all of that was built on lies and manipulation. She paused, then continued. Now they're growing up with a single mother and a grandmother and a modest house in Colorado. We don't have the money for elaborate vacations or private schools, but they have something that's infinitely more valuable. They have authentic love, honest communication, and the knowledge that they're safe. I put my arm around my daughter, marveling at the wisdom she'd gained through her ordeal. They have a mother who survived something unimaginable to protect them, I said. They have a legacy of strength and resilience. That's worth more than any material advantage David's money could have provided. As we turned out the lights and prepared for sleep, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this peaceful moment. 6 months ago, Sarah had been fighting for her life in a hospital bed. Now she was building a new future for herself and her children, one based on truth, safety, and genuine love. The poison David had given her had nearly killed her, but it had also, in a strange way, freed her. Freed her from the illusion of the perfect life she'd thought she was living. Freed her from the manipulation that had isolated her from the people who truly loved her. Freed her from the need to be anything other than authentically herself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There always would be, in any life worth living. But tonight, in our home filled with the peaceful breathing of sleeping children, Sarah and I both knew that we had something David's money could never have bought. We had each other, and we had the truth, and we had a future that belonged entirely to us. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.